monitor the ingestion, to monitor the transformation activities in our Fabric environment. Also, we will discuss how these things are going to help us basically in monitoring part. So let's proceed further. Let's discuss about the monitoring of these activities within the Fabric. So we have got some monitoring best practices first of all. So we need to understand monitoring first. Monitoring means it's a process of collecting the system. What I do is I collect the system's data. I collect the metrics which determine if a system is healthy and operating as expected. That is what the monitoring does. Monitoring also exposes the errors that occurred and when they happened. So if you want to investigate the issues, if you want to remediate the errors, historical data should be analyzed so we get a picture of the health of a system or the process. That is how the monitoring works, we can say. Now, if I talk about monitoring the Fabric activities, in Fabric, what we can do is we can schedule the activities and jobs which perform tasks like the data movement or the data transformations. We can actually schedule activities and jobs to perform all these tasks. Activities will be having some dependencies on one another. So we need to make sure that the data arrives in its expected location on time and that system errors or delays don't affect the users or it don't affect the downstream activities. So we have some activities in Fabric which will allow us to perform the task that will deliver the data to the users. And these activities we can say should be monitored as well. So the very first activity which we should be monitoring is the data pipeline activity. Why? Because data pipeline is what? It's a group of activities which it includes that together perform a data ingestion task. So pipelines will allow us to manage, extract, transform, and load the activities together instead of doing it individually. That is what the data pipeline activity is important to monitor. Secondly, we should be monitoring the data flows. What is data flow? It's again a tool for ingesting, loading, and transforming the data using a low-code interface, we can say. So data flows can be run manually or it can be scheduled or it can run as part of the pipeline's orchestration. So we can actually monitor the start and the end time. We can monitor the status, the duration, the table load activities. All these things we can monitor within the data flows. Third, which we can monitor, which item we can monitor is the semantic models refreshes which we can monitor. Semantic model is what? It's basically a visual representation of a data model which is ready for reporting and the visualization purposes, we can say. It will contain some transformations, some calculations, some data relationships. These things it will contain. So we can monitor the refresh tries to help identify any transient issues before classifying an issue as a failure. That is what we can monitor in the semantic model refreshes. Then we can monitor the Spark job, the notebooks, the lake houses. Notebooks are what? They are the interface for developing the Apache Spark jobs. Data can be loaded, it can be transformed for lake houses using Spark and notebooks. So what we can monitor is we can monitor the Spark jobs progress, we can monitor the task executions, resource usage, we can review all the Spark logs, all these things we can do. So these are few of the items which we can monitor. Now let me tell you what are the monitoring's best practices. What are the best practices which monitoring includes? Continuously, if we monitor the data ingestion, transformation, and load processes, it will ensure that they are running smoothly. So monitoring best practices includes identify what to monitor, which means you have to identify what you need to monitor and you have to track the metrics for the same. So identifying in the sense, if you're observing things on a regular basis, you basically get to know, you monitor the things in a better way. So you know if there is any deviations or you know what you have to identify, which is the key element for your organization which you are monitoring, that matters. Second best practices says to collect and review the data. You can collect and you can analyze the data on a regular basis to identify the normal behavior. So you can spot any anomalies when they occur. For those purposes, you have to collect and review the data on a regular basis. Third says to resolve the issues. Resolve the issues means what you can do is you can basically review the logs, you can basically review the metrics regularly. So you identify and establish the parameters for a normal system's behavior. Also, what you can do is you can take actions to resolve the problems when the metrics or when the logs shows deviations from the normal behavior. The next best practice is about optimizing the performance. So optimize the performance by using the monitoring data to identify the bottlenecks or the performance issues, we can say. So these are some of the monitoring best practices which we have. These are some of the monitoring best practices which we discussed. Now we have Microsoft Fabric Monitor Hub, which is there. We can use these monitoring hub. So let me give you an idea what this monitoring hub is all about. The visualizations tools make monitoring easier for us. It will help us to identify the trends or any anomalies if you want to identify. Those things you can identify easily with the help of the visualization tools. Monitor Hub is the monitoring visualization tool in the Microsoft's Fabric. And Monitor Hub will collect and aggregate the data which is coming from selected Fabric items and processes. It stores Fabric activity data in a common interface. So you can actually view the status of multiple different data integrations, transformations, movement, analysis activities, everything you can view in the Fabric in one place rather than monitoring each and everything separately. This is what the monitoring hub is going to help us with. So what are the activities which will be displayed within the monitoring hub? There are some sort of activities which we can see in the monitoring metadata, like it includes the data pipelines execution history, what is the data flows executions, what is data mart and what is semantic models refreshes we can basically monitor. Then Spark job and notebook execution history and job details we can monitor. So these are some of the activities which we can see in the monitoring metadata for the Microsoft Fabric Monitor Hub. Now, how to view the monitoring hub? If you want to view the monitoring hub, it can be opened simply by selecting a monitor icon within the Fabric navigation pane, which I'll show you when I'm doing the demo where you can find it. Other than that, you can view the Fabric's activity details also. Like this is for a preview hub, succeeded semantic model, then data pipeline. Now, suppose if you want to basically there is a data pipeline or a data flow. So if you want to see the activity details about it, you can do that also. Each activity which we have in the monitor hub, it can be selected and several actions can be performed for the selected activity as well. Actions vary by the activity and it includes options such as opening the activity, then retrying it. We can also view the activity details or the historical runs. All these actions vary depending upon which activity type you are viewing. So if you want to view this information, you have to just move your cursor towards this. You will see three dots, three ellipses, which appears and when you hover your mouse over an activity. So click on it and that is where you can view the details. So what all details you can view? So the screen which appears is customized for the activity and that is where you can select and provide clarity about what happened during the activity. If you want to view any metadata, you can view basically the activity status metadata. You can view the start and end time, the duration you can view, the activity statistics you can view. All these metadatas you can view. This is basically how we can use the monitoring hub, we can say. Also, we can investigate what happened during a Fabric activity, which means like if you have a requirement to investigate what happened during the Fabric activity, we can do that also. So to investigate what happened during an activity, some activities in the Monitor Hub will include the hyperlinks, which will allow us to drill down into the execution details. That will also be there. So information is provided about an error and provided about the success or the failure of an execution. These things is what we can investigate further. Now, how we can monitor the data ingestion? Like if you want to monitor the data ingestion, how we can monitor the data ingestion is what we are discussing over here. Now, quite simple, what we can see is basically about monitoring the data ingestion part. If I talk about this, we have a central monitoring hub which we can use for the monitoring. It's a unified workspace where we can track the ingestion activities across the pipelines or the data flows or the event streams, notebooks, and all these things with real-time status updates and success failure alerts in it. So this is the same monitoring hub which we discussed right now. These are how we can monitor the data's ingestion. One way is using the monitoring hub. Second way is by monitoring the data pipelines and the data flows auditing, which means there is a built-in auditing which tracks the ingestion records, the log errors it will track. It will provide some performance metrics also. We can control the tables, enable metadata-driven ingestion management, and we can select some data movement also. So this is another way in which we can monitor the data ingestion. Third is by visual reporting and the notifications. Like if you want to configure some alerts, you want to notify the teams on the ingestion success or the failure, that you can do. Dashboards will provide some visual summaries of the throughput, latency, error trends to ensure the data quality and operational reliability is there. So if I talk about these best practices of monitor data ingestion, what are the best practices is we can simply combine our real-time event streams monitoring with the batch pipeline auditing in the monitoring hub, and it provides us with more visibility and proactive issue resolution, we can say, for our Fabric data ingestions workflow. So this is what we can monitor, and this is how we can monitor the data ingestion. These are the different ways in which we can monitor, we say. Now, moving on, we need to understand about how we can take the action with the activator. So first, we need to understand what is an activator. When these monitoring surfaces changing data, anomalies or critical events or alerts are generated or any actions are triggered. So what should happen? So the real-time data analytics is commonly based on the ingestion and processing of a data stream, which consists of a perpetual series of data. Typically, it is related to some specific point-in-time events. Now we have an activator which is there. So let me tell you what is this activator. Activator is basically a technology which we have within the Fabric, and it enables automated processing of the events that trigger the actions. For example, we can use this activator like if you want to notify yourself by email when a value in an event stream deviates from a specific range, or to run a notebook to perform some Spark-based data processing logic when a real-time dashboard is updated. So for all these purposes, we can use the activators to notify you by an email, we can say. This is basically what is the use of an activator. We can take some action with the activator. Activator operates based on the 4 core concepts which we have. Activator is actually based on these 4 core concepts. Number 1 which we have is the events. So each record which we have in a stream of data, it represents an event that has occurred at a specific point in time. That is an event. Then second core concept is of the objects. Object means the data in an event record can be used to represent an object, such as a sales order or a sensor or some other business entity. That becomes the objects. Then we have properties. Properties means the fields in the event data can be mapped to properties of the business object, which represent some aspects of its state. Like for example, a total amount field might represent a sales order total, or a temperature field might represent the temperature which is measured by an environmental sensor. Those things it will represent. Then we have rules. The key to using activator to automate the actions based on event is to define the rules that set conditions under which an action is triggered based on the property values of the objects which is referenced in the events. So we have some rules which we can create. Like for example, We might define a rule which sends an email to a maintenance manager if the temperature measured by a sensor exceeds a specific threshold in those cases. So this is basically what the rules does. We have some conditions based on which we set the rules, we can say. So this is how we can take action with the activator. Now there are multiple use cases also of the activator. Why do we use this activator? Activators will basically help us in various scenarios such as dynamic inventory management or real-time customer engagement or effective resource allocation in the cloud environments. In all these scenarios, it is going to help us. We can use activator to initiate some marketing actions when the product sales drop, or in case if you want to send some notifications when the temperature changes, which could affect some perishable goods. For that purposes, you can use activator. Or if you want to trigger an alert when a shipment hasn't been updated within an expected time frame, then you can use an activator. Or in case if you want to run some ads when the same store sales decline, for those purposes, all these purposes, you can use the activators. In very simple words, we can say. So this is basically how we can take actions with the help of the activator. This is the use case of an activator. So this is how we can choose the action. Rules will have conditions and the actions. Based on a condition, what action should be taken? So action can be taken like this. If I want basically a Teams message to be shared on a particular condition, so I can provide the recipient email ID and what is the headline, what is the message which it should be sent. Like this, we can actually configure the activator.